Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where it's Wednesday. That means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It's our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And today is a very special episode today, because today we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Marvel Epic Collections. Marvel Epic Collections, these fat collections of Marvel Comics classic series. So, I love Marvel Epic Collections, obviously, and I've been collecting them for the 10 years that they've been available. I don't have all the Marvel Epic Collections, but I've got a lot of them. And they're going strong. Marvel Epic Collections have proven to be enormously popular and very collectible, actually. They go out of print rather quickly, very often anyway. So they're one of those things, man. When they come out, get them. Although they do reprint, they do a lot of reprinting for their Epic Collections, so that's a good thing. So Marvel Comics, I love Marvel Comics. I've always loved Marvel ever since I was a little kid. Most of the comics that I've bought over the years have been Marvel Comics. And Marvel Comics, I mean, they're just something special. And Marvel, I have to say, they are smart when it comes to reprints and reprinting their material. They know the value of what they have. DC has had a harder time. DC Comics has had a harder time than Marvel has, for sure. Marvel's got it down. They've got their reprint program down. And they've got a few different formats, you can get for reprints of old material. You can get those big, massive omnibus volumes, which I have up there and down there and over in the other room. I've got quite a few omnibuses as well, but I love these handy paperback reprints. They're just fabulous. And like I said, at this time, they are 10 years old. They came out 10 years ago. Now, before the Marvel Epic Collections, when it came to reprinting their older material, they did it in a couple different ways. One of the ways they did it were in the fancy pants Marvel Masterworks editions. Marvel Masterworks have been around for, I don't even know how long they've been printing Marvel Masterworks. I think they've been printing them since the 80s. And when was this one printed? I should probably have looked before I made this video. Does it say? This one's from 1990. So this is a 1990 edition of Captain America. Captain America from Tales of Suspense, numbers 59 through 81. And they still print these. They've been printing these forever. And Marvel Masterworks is the kind of deluxe premier way to get classic Marvel comics. Probably the most fancy pants way you can get them still is the Marvel Masterworks editions. Really nice, beautifully printed comics. This was the fancy way to do it. But they also had, for a long time, a really cheapo way to reprint Marvel Comics, and that was this. For a long time, they had the Essentials line, which actually are enormously collectible today. Some of these old Essential volumes, they're kind of expensive, including this one. This is Tomb of Dracula, Volume 4. And the deal with the Essential volumes was that they were really cheap. They were really cheaply printed. They were thick, so they put a lot of comics into these volumes. They were all in black and white. I mean, these stories were originally in black and white, but all the comics that were printed in the Epic Collections were in black and white. SpiderMan, the Avengers, whatever they did, it was all in black and white. And they pumped out a lot of these. And they were very popular because they were an inexpensive way for readers to read a lot of out-of-print superhero comics, out-of-print Marvel comics that there was just no way to read otherwise. And I had a ton of them. And the way I read a lot of Marvel Comics for the first time that I had missed was through the Essentials line. So I was reading these cheap black and white fat volumes. But eventually they discontinued these. The decision was made to discontinue the Essentials line because they felt that these comics should be printed in color. And so these were discontinued. And the Epic collections were born. I believe this volume here, I could be wrong, but I believe this one, The Mighty Thor, War of the Pantheons, was the first Marvel Epic collection to be printed. They did an interesting thing with the Marvel Epic collections in that, unlike the Essentials line or the Marvel Masterworks line, these were not printed in chronological order. So this was the first Thor Epic collection ever printed, and it is volume 16. It's volume 16. And what they've done, what they decided to do at the beginning was kind of jump around. Volume 16 would come out, and then maybe volume 1, and then maybe volume 6. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want to get stuck printing just comics from the 1960s forever. For years, they would be just printing comics from the 60s. They felt like they wanted to jump around to different times, different storylines, different creative teams, a lot of which had not been reprinted before, or at least not reprinted for years. It gave them some flexibility. And then there were other comics, like the Walter Simonson Thor comics, for example, that had been reprinted over and over and over again, and they're comics you can get pretty easily. So they decide, you know what, we'll not print those right away. We'll sit on those because there's so many of them out there. We'll print some other stuff that maybe hasn't been seen recently. And so that's what they did. At this point, they've been printing Epic collections, though, for 10 years. So we're getting pretty close to a time when we have full runs of Epic collections. We're not there yet, but in only a few years, these sets will be complete, which is interesting. And they have moved on to doing an Epic collection line called Modern Epics, the Modern Epic collections. And those are Epic collections, I think, that are from the year 2000 on. So Epic collections are pretty exclusively 20th century comics, whereas the modern epics are going to be, or are, the year 2000 up till today. I think that's how they're doing it, which is good. I'm glad they are continuing on with epics up through the modern times. That's fantastic. But this, like I said, I believe was the first one. They look pretty much the same. The font up here is a little different. That's really the only difference. There have been changes over the years in printing quality. They've used some printers that were frankly terrible once or twice. Altogether, though, the quality of these has been pretty high, with some very notable exceptions over the years. The paper has changed here and there. The paper nowadays is a bit glossier than it was in this first Epic collection, but the format is basically the same. It's funny if you open up this older Epic collection to see the Epic collections that were available or are due to be available soon, and there's only like, what, 6 of them? There's only 6 here. Whereas if you pick up a new Epic collection like this one, this is Daredevil Into the Fire, Volume 17. You open this up and look at all those epics. And then it continues on onto the back cover. This has been an extremely successful series. So I thought I would, talk about that. I'll show you my 10 favorite Epic collections. And I'll mention a couple Epic collections that I hope they do, that they don't have in the Epic line. So my 10 favorite epics. This is one of them. This is in no particular order. This is Fantastic Four Volume 1, the world's greatest comic magazine. This has the first, 18 Fantastic Four issues. Which are the first Fantastic Four issues? Well, they're not the first Fantastic Four stories I ever read, but they were the ones I read over and over again when I was a kid, because they were reprinted at the time in tiny little pocket books. And I love these stories. And these are the stories in this Marvel Epic Collection that kicked off the Marvel Universe, the official Marvel Universe. They started with the Fantastic Four, and they're just glorious. I love them. Fantastic Four happens to be my favorite Marvel comic book. And, you know, all the Marvel epics that they have for the Fantastic Four so far, I have. They're not all on the shelf yet. I've got a big pile of epics I still have to put on the shelf. But this is wonderful. So that's one of them. Also, of course, Spider-Man. Same story. I originally read these issues of Spider-Man in those little pocket books that were reprinted when I was a kid, which contained the stories in this volume. This is Great Power by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. There were two epic collections that collect Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's stuff. Loved them. Wonderful stuff. The first time I encountered Spider-Man, I think, was in the cartoon. There was a Spider-Man cartoon on when I was a kid. But the first Spider-Man stories I remember reading were the stories that you could find in this volume. And they're wonderful. So this is Volume 1 of Spider-Man. Great Power. It's fantastic. But another of my favorites is another Spider-Man, and that's this one. This is Spider-Man Volume 3. This is Spider-Man No More. And this is the beginning of John Romita's time on the book. So this is by Stan Lee and John Romita. John Romita is probably the most influential Spider-Man artist of all time. He's my favorite Spider-Man artist. I think he was probably the best artist on Spider-Man. And this just has some glorious, wonderful issues from his time on the book. It's just magnificent. John Romita's Spider-Man was beautiful, and you could find the beginning of John Romita's run in this volume. Next, though, is the XMen. The XMen, one of Marvel Comics' most popular series ever. And this is the X-Men Volume 5. This is Second Genesis. This has the stories by Dave Cockrum and Chris Claremont when they reimagined the X-Men. The old team was out and the new team was in, and this is the team that we're kind of familiar with Wolverine and Nightcrawler and all those guys. And it's a fantastic epic collection. It's great. And what can I say about it that hasn't already been said for these issues? They were fantastic. So there you go. Second Genesis. And then comes Thor. This is Thor Epic Collection Volume 2, When Titans Clash. Now, the first Marvel Epic Collection has some stories in it that, well, frankly, aren't all that good. It took a while for Stan Lee to get a handle on this character. But in this volume, which has stories by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, this is when Thor really started to shine. This has Thor's first battles with Hercules. These stories are really, really good. And this is, I think, when Thor really started to take off, was with these stories that are in Volume 2 of Thor's epic collections. And next comes Daredevil. This is Volume 1 of Daredevil. I love Daredevil. And again, I have every Daredevil epic collection that's been printed so far. The first one, though, I really, really like because it has stories in here that were drawn by Wally Wood. Wally Wood actually designed the costume that we're more familiar with Daredevil. He started off with this costume, but this is the costume as Wally Wood reimagined it. And Wally Wood, one of the greatest comic book artists of all time, he did some he did a few. He didn't do many, but he did a few really cool Daredevil issues. And the artwork is just awesome. And also in this issue, we have some John Romita early work. And they include some early Spider-Man appearances. So you have his earliest work on Spider-Man in these Daredevil issues. So it's really cool. It's a really cool Daredevil epic collection. Next, the Invincible Iron Man, Volume 1. So I do not claim that these are the greatest Iron Man stories ever, but I really love these stories by Stan Lee and Don Heck. They're really cool stories, and there were quite a few artists in here, including some work by Jack Kirby. We have the first issue where Iron Man appeared when he was just a kind of big gray guy clunking around in this really clunky armor, and then showed up later as we know him now. It's a more familiar costume he's got on there. But I love these old Don Heck stories. They're just really cool, and I love Don Heck's artwork in here. It's just really awesome. This is some awesome stuff. And I first read these in the Marvel Essentials volume, the cheap black and white Marvel Essentials volume. The first time I ever read these really early Iron Man stories, and I just loved them. And so this is one of my favorite epic collections for sure. Next, my favorite individual non-team Marvel comic book, my favorite Marvel superhero, is Captain America. I love Captain America. This is the first volume of Captain America. Captain America lives again with those great Stan Lee, Jack Kirby Captain America stories. Here's the story we just saw in Iron Man. And this reprints all these original Captain America stories. They're just glorious. They're just fantastic issues full of action. This has Strange Tales, number 114, Avengers, number 4, and Tales of Suspense, 58 through 96. So there's a lot packed into this epic collection. A lot of epic collections run anywhere from 400 to 500 pages. There are some longer, there are some shorter, but that's about what they run, around 400 to 500 pages, around there. So you get a lot of comics. You get a lot of comics, and they're great. And the last on this list of my 10 favorites is another Captain America. This is Man Without a Country. This is my favorite run on Captain America, which came out in the 90s, which was not a great time for Marvel Comics, at least at this point. This was shortly before they sent Captain America packing to be reborn in the dreadful Heroes Reborn series. But this was dynamite. This original series by Mark Waid and Ron Garney. Just great stuff. The artwork was magnificent. And this has that original run. They did come back after the whole Heroes Reborn fiasco. But this has the original run by Mark Waid and Ron Garney. And Waid really, really understood this character and really knows how to write this character. So it was very fun. This was a tremendously fun epic collection. And there are so many more. There are so many more to read. There are still some things that I wish would be put into the Marvel Epic Collection. One of the comics I really wish they would publish as epics is Tomb of Dracula. That's one of my favorite Marvel comics. Really think that they should put Tomb of Dracula in the epics. They've got a series or a line they've got the Complete Collection line, which I think has had its day. I think epic collections are so collectible and so popular that I think it's time for Tomb of Dracula to move into the epic line. I feel the same way for, Werewolf by Night and all that other Marvel horror stuff, which Steve Donoghue hates so much and I love. All that I think should be put into Marvel Epics. There's a lot of kind of obscure characters that are starting to get into the Marvel line now. Not obscure, but less popular. Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos are in the Epic Collections now. Ghost Rider is in Epic Collections now, which makes me think that they could very well put Tomb of Dracula in Epics if Ghost Rider could be in there. And Morbius made it into the Epic Collections, mostly because of that Morbius movie, which I hear is really bad. But if Morbius can make it in, then certainly Tomb of Dracula can make it in, as well as a bunch of older stuff. I mean, they do licensed material. They have a really robust line of Star Wars epics. And if they have that, I don't know why they don't have an Indiana Jones epic collection, because they really should. They did a series, Marvel did, of Indiana Jones comics, which I remember being really good, but it's been years since I've read them. So I'm kind of surprised they haven't done some reprinting of Indiana Jones since they just came out with that movie, the ill-fated movie that just came out. But it could be that the rights are somehow tied up with Paramount. Maybe. I don't know. I thought Disney had Indiana Jones free and clear, but maybe they don't. Anyway, that would be nice to have. And there's some other weird ones like the Micronauts. I know they're coming out with a Micronauts. Don't laugh at me. They're the Micronauts. They're awesome. So they are coming out with a Micronauts omnibus in a few months. So maybe I'll see the Micronauts in the Epic Collections. You never know. Most of the main superheroes are in here. I don't think Nova is in here. I'm not quite sure why. But there are still like some comics that could very well fit into the Epic Collections that just haven't been done for whatever reason. Where's ROM? Why don't they have a ROM Epic Collection? That's what I want. Again, coming out with a ROM omnibus. Right now, Steve Donoghue's really screaming and rolling on the floor and tearing out his hair. But I think ROM would make a nice addition. You know, it's true. Most of the really good stuff has been put already into the Epic Collections, but not Tomb of Dracula, and that was really good, and that should be in here, I think. There are probably plenty more that I'm not thinking of that should be in the Marvel Epic Collections and are not. But it is a fantastic line, and it's ever growing. Like I said, they're doing the Marvel Modern Epics, which look very close to the Epics. They've changed the format a little bit, or the design, I should say, a little bit. But they should look just fine on the shelf. Because, like I said, Captain America, the modern epics, will be following right after the classic epic collections. So you could file them all together and it'll be fine. Although I will need probably another bookshelf eventually. Eventually I'll need another bookshelf. But these are amazing. I love these. Such a wonderful way to read all of these classic Marvel comics. They're magnificent, like I said. I'll shut up now. That's all I have to say. I will catch you next time.